Turin, Italy. January 3rd, 1889. The square outside the Hotel Carlo Alberto. A cab driver was beating his horse. The animal had collapsed between the shafts, unable to pull. The driver was old, exhausted, late, and using a wooden whip on its flank. A man in his mid-40s stepped off the curb, wool overcoat, mustache like a curtain. He walked across the cobblestones, threw both arms around the horse's neck, and began to sob. He collapsed beside the animal and lost consciousness. His landlord carried him back to his lodging. He never spoke a coherent sentence in public again. For the next 11 years, until his death in 1900, Friedrich Nietzsche sat in a chair, was bathed by his sister, and stared at the wall. He was 44 years old. He had written 11 books that almost nobody in Germany was reading. Within 30 years, those books would shape the 20th century. Its art, its politics, its psychology, its catastrophe. In the next 12 minutes, you'll see the moment a man saw too much, too clearly, and the brain made a decision the body could not survive. You'll understand the three things he was trying to warn the world about, and why all three came true. And you'll see the cosmic joke in the way history rewarded him for the warning. Miss this, and you'll keep mistaking Nietzsche for a quote on a poster. Most people never get past the mustache. He saw too much. Lesson 1. What fills the silence when God is dead? Nietzsche grew up in a Lutheran parsonage in Saxony. His father was a pastor. So was his grandfather. The plan, when he was a boy, was that he would become one too. He read the scripture as a child the way other children read fairy tales, and he believed it the same way. His father died of a brain disease when Nietzsche was 4. His baby brother died a year later. The boy who had been raised to believe in a kind God watched a kind God do nothing. He was old enough to remember the funerals. He was old enough to ask why. By 15, he had read the Greek philosophers. By 24, he had a doctorate and a chair in classical philology at the University of Basel, the youngest professor in Europe. And he had stopped believing. Not in dramatic atheism, not in the loud Victorian way. He had simply noticed that the God of his childhood had died inside him without leaving anything to replace him. The architecture was still there: morality, law, family, decency, the polite Sunday. But the foundation was gone. This was the first thing he tried to warn the world about. Not God does not exist. That was easy to argue, and other men had done it. What he said was harder. He said, God is dead. We have killed him, and we have not yet understood what we have done. He meant the moral structure of European civilization rested on a belief most educated people no longer held. The cathedrals were still standing, but the belief inside them was already cooling like a body. Once that body went cold, the question would arrive that nobody was prepared for. Now what? What replaces a God you no longer believe in? What reason do you have to be kind to a stranger? Why not lie? Why not steal? Why not kill if you can get away with it? The pastor's son was not asking this rhetorically. He thought the next century would have to face it without an answer. He was right. The 20th century did everything he warned about. The world wars, the ideologies, the camps. He died before any of it. But he saw it coming. He saw too much. This is the part most channels won't keep going through. Subscribe. That's the signal I need to keep making philosophy this honest. The next philosopher is already in the queue. Click the bell. Lesson 2. Would you live this life again, exactly as it is, forever? In 1881, Nietzsche was hiking near Lac Silvaplana in the Swiss Alps. He stopped at a pyramid-shaped boulder beside the path. The thought hit him there. He wrote about it later, as if it had been delivered to him from outside himself. The thought was this: imagine you were told that everything in your life, every moment, every breath, every disappointment, every small humiliation, every joy, was going to repeat. Not once, forever. The same arc, the same mistakes, the same cup of coffee on the same morning, the same argument with the same person, infinitely. Would you scream? That was the test. Not is this true? He never claimed it was. The eternal recurrence was a thought experiment, a ruler. If the answer is, I would scream, then your life is unlivable. If the answer is yes, again, exactly as it is, all of it, then you are the rare thing he called a free spirit. The test was unbearable on purpose. It cut through every consolation Christianity had offered. There is no heaven at the end of suffering. There is no afterlife where the wrongs are corrected. There is only this, and it repeats. He was not telling people to believe it. He was telling them to live as if it were true, to love their fate so completely that they would choose every detail again. He called this amor fati, love of fate. It is a brutal philosophy. It is also, to anyone who has ever wished part of their past away, the only philosophy that ends the wishing. Ask the question on yourself before reading further. Imagine you have to live the last year of your life again, exactly as it has been. Every text, and missed deadline, and bad meeting, and small revenge. Infinitely. Are you screaming yet? That answer tells you what year you actually had. He saw too much. Lesson 3. The Last Man. The Quiet Catastrophe of Comfort. By the 1880s, Nietzsche was almost completely alone. His health was destroying him. Migraines that lasted weeks. Eye pain so severe he could not read for hours at a time. He wandered between Italy and Switzerland, renting cheap rooms, eating little, writing through the headaches. He was watching modern Europe more clearly than anyone. And he saw something nobody wanted to name. He saw that the comfortable life European civilization was building, the safe middle-class life of clean offices, careful manners, scheduled vacations, mild opinions, modest ambitions, was producing something he gave a precise name to. He called it the last man. The last man does not strive. The last man invents happiness. The last man has small pleasures for the day and small pleasures for the night, and is careful of his health. He blinks. The last man is not evil. He is small. Nietzsche thought this was the real ending point of history. Not catastrophe, not collapse. A slow shrinking. A civilization where nothing burns and nothing ignites, and people grow old in front of screens that had not been invented yet, but were coming. The last man builds the comfortable cage, and then asks, what else is there? Look at your week, the desk, the feed, the schedule that takes care of itself, the opinions you can hold without consequence, the relationships you can leave at any time without explanation, the pleasures for the day and the pleasures for the night, and the careful management of your health. If you have ever felt the suspicion that something inside you is being slowly hollowed out, even though everything is fine, that is the suspicion Nietzsche named for you 140 years ago, before the screen was invented. The answer he tried to give was the will to power, not power over others, power over yourself. The will to become more than your conditioning, your appetites, your fear. The will to climb the mountain inside you. He thought a small number of people in any generation could do it. He was wrong about the small number. The people who rose to power in the 20th century read him and decided they were the climbers. They were not. They were the last men with weapons. He saw too much. If you've made it this far, what's next is the part most people never teach. Watch the next minute carefully. It is the moment a man's lifetime of writing and a man's lifetime of suffering met in a single gesture. Most people never see what is actually happening in this scene. Visual pivot, back to Turin, the square, the horse. Nobody knows exactly why he broke that morning. He had written his last books at a feverish pace through 1888. Twilight of the Idols, The Antichrist, Exe Homo. They are some of the most lucid prose he ever produced. They are also the books of a man whose brain was running too hot. The medical theory in his lifetime was tertiary syphilis. The modern theory is more likely a slow-progressing tumor on the right frontal lobe. We will never know. What we have is the scene. A man in his mid-40s walks into a square. He sees an old horse being beaten by an old man. He crosses the cobblestones. He throws his arms around the animal's neck. That gesture is the entire philosophy compressed into one motion. The man who had spent his life writing about the will to power, the death of God, the last man, the eternal recurrence, the man who had argued against pity as a slave virtue, knelt in the street and pitied a horse. He could not help himself. He could not stop weeping. The body of the philosophy and the body of the man broke at the same moment. He went home. He wrote a few last letters in elegant handwriting, signed Dionysus and the Crucified. He never wrote a coherent sentence again. The brain that had seen too much closed its own door. The brother was handed to the sister. The sister handed him to the people he warned us about. He was no longer there to defend himself. Payoff. The cosmic joke. Elizabeth Forster Nietzsche was an anti-Semite who had moved to Paraguay with her husband to start a pure Aryan colony. The colony failed. Her husband killed himself. She came back to Germany ruined and looking for something to rebuild around. Her broken brother was the something. She moved him into her house. She controlled access to his papers. After his death in 1900, she edited and published his unfinished notes as a book she titled The Will to Power, arranging the fragments to suit the politics she wanted them to serve. She handed Adolf Hitler a copy in person at the Nietzsche Archive in 1934. This is the man who had written in his actual published books that anti-Semitism was a sickness. The man who had broken with his closest friend, the composer Wagner, partly over Wagner's anti-Semitism. The man who had said that the German nation was the most spiritually impoverished in Europe. That man's books became the official philosophy of the Third Reich. The cosmic joke is total. He spent his life warning about the last man, and the last men with weapons made him their prophet. He spent his life arguing against nationalism, and the nationalists made him a national treasure. He had told the world, in writing, that he would die if he was misunderstood. The world misunderstood him on a planetary scale. And then, slowly, decades later, the philosophy started being read by the people he had actually been writing for. The artists, the wounded, the ones who had also stopped believing in the kind God of their childhood and were trying to figure out what to do with the silence. The ones who had hugged a horse, in their own way, in their own square. He saw too much. Look at your life again. The desk, the screen, the schedule, the pleasures for the day and the pleasures for the night, and the careful management of your health. The horse in Turin is still in the street. He is still kneeling beside it. He is still telling you, without speaking, that something has been happening to all of us for a long time. The brain that saw too much was the brain that loved most. If this reached you, subscribe. That is the signal I need to keep making philosophy this honest. The next one I want you to watch is Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who wrote to survive. I'll put it right here on the end screen. Marcus is the man who proved you can carry the weight without breaking. He wrote his way through it. Click it. He saw too much. He almost saw it through.